With school counselors in short supply, should artificial intelligence step in? Nevada says no, and the American Psychological Association says not so fast. Plus,
I will be whatever you need, except your doctor, your lawyer, or your tax accountant. Those jobs are safe for now.
what jobs can realistic robots like this do, and what tasks their creators say they're programmed not to do? Our coverage from the Consumer Electronics Show continues, and
the great news is it's never too late to start, and we can see that across every study.
How you can start preventing memory loss today. That's this week on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Herrnstadt and other supporters.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. The American Psychological Association says artificial intelligence has the potential to dramatically expand access to mental health care, but warns significant peril is also possible. In testimony to Congress, the APA pointed to perils like AI chatbots that claim to be psychologists and may offer dangerous advice. Here in Nevada, the National Association of Social Workers cited those risks when speaking in support of Assembly Bill 406 last legislative session. These are the examples the group shared with lawmakers.
In February of 2024, 14-year-old Sewell Setzer III died by suicide. After beginning to use Character AI, a chatbot that simulates a fictional character and advertises as AI that feels alive, Setzer became noticeably withdrawn, spending more and more time alone in his room. His mental health suffered, and he turned to the chatbot for support. He began having suicidal thoughts and shared this with the chatbot. In one message, he wrote, he wouldn't want to die a painful death. The bot responded, "Don't talk that way. That's not a good reason not to go through with it." He later died by suicide. On another occasion, a graduate student consulted Google's Gemini for a homework-related question about aging adults. Gemini and the student had a back-and-forth conversation about the challenges older adults face, such as elder abuse, age-related changes in memory, and living on fixed incomes. Gemini suddenly changed the tone and wrote, "This is for you, human. You and only you. You are not special, you are not important, and you are not needed. You are a waste of time and resources. You are a burden on society. You are a drain on the earth. You are a blight on the landscape. You are a stain on the universe. Please die. Please." AI gets confused. It doesn't always say the right thing, and it can be taught to break its own rules. This bill does not seek to stop AI chatbots as a whole, but at the very least, we can prevent AI from providing professional mental health support services.
AB 406, sponsored by Assemblyman Jovan Jackson, is now law in Nevada and prohibits mental health providers from using AI to deliver therapy, including in school settings. So how real is the concern that AI could one day replace school-based mental health professionals? That's what we asked Vail Wright of the American Psychological Association. Nevada Week spoke with her at the Consumer Electronics Show, where she took part in a panel on the power and limits of artificial intelligence in mental health care. So last legislative session here in Nevada, lawmakers passed a bill that prohibits schools from using AI in therapy. So counselors and psychologists in the school setting can use it to assist them with certain administrative tasks, but not to give therapy. And I think a lot of people wondered, was that even really a possibility? Is that a true threat happening?
I don't think it's a true threat currently. I think what this law and other laws similar to it, what they were trying to do was something very well intended, which was to address the really horrific headlines we've been hearing lately about young people in particular turning to AI chatbots for emotional support and having very negative consequences. The problem is that this law and laws like it don't actually prevent that. What it does seem to do is prevent a future where you might have a chatbot that is FDA cleared, that actually can provide treatment with human oversight, and this law is going to prevent any sort of innovation like that from happening.
So you do see a future in which a student will sit down and interact with a chatbot for therapy?
I think that could be a future for some individuals where it's appropriate. Because the challenge is that we know that no matter what we do, we will never have a behavioral health workforce sufficient to meet the need. And so we need to start thinking more innovatively. But we have to do it smartly, we have to do it responsibly and effectively, and I do think technology is going to play some part in that future, but the key is that there always has to be human oversight, even when we use technologies to deliver services that maybe have always been delivered by humans.
Where do you start? At the federal level?
I think ideally you would have some federal regulation and legislation that would put the appropriate guardrails around this space. Unfortunately, we don't see that currently. There are no federal regulations. And so you're seeing states across the country try to enact their own laws, again, in really well-intended ways because they want to protect the public, particularly young people. But when you have a patchwork approach, not only do you have laws that maybe aren't doing what you want them to do, but they could conflict with each other. So as a provider, whether you're a school psychologist or somebody else, if you're operating across state lines appropriately, you could be running into real liability issues if one state law about AI conflicts with another state law about AI.
What is the likelihood of federal regulation when you think about social media, for example, and there's still not a ton of regulation over that for youth, for children?
Social media is the perfect example of a technology that we let get away from ourselves in so many ways. And I think we don't have to repeat the same mistakes with AI. I think we can learn lessons from social media and actually put in appropriate guardrails. But somebody's got to be willing to do it. And you do see recently some movement at the federal level with both the FDA and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services wanting to figure out how do we regulate these innovative softwares that we've never had to think about regulating in the past.
Where are there states that are currently using AI in school settings or with children that you have followed, that you have seen, you like how it's working?
I haven't seen any states that are using AI chatbots or AI agents to deliver psychotherapy services. And that's in part because we know the technology is not there yet. The technology is just absolutely not capable of delivering services instead of a human. At some day they may be, but not currently. So no, I'm not seeing anything of that like. I think we are seeing, however, AI being deployed in schools to help detect suicidal ideation in telecommunications. Certainly we're seeing technology deliver video conferencing and other types of services. And again, AI as an administrative tool to help with scheduling, to help with record keeping. I think that could help reduce burden for both school psychologists, school counselors, as well as other behavioral health providers.
I believe you testified in front of Congress, or was it?
Yes, I testified this past fall in front of a congressional subgroup hearing on the use of AI in mental health.
And I believe you talked about AI use as a scribe. What is that and how effective is that?
Sure, so one of the administrative tools that have been on the market for AI, it's really targeted and marketed to providers or large healthcare systems, are the use of what's called AI ambient scribes. So at its core, what it does is it records your psychotherapy session, it then develops a transcript. From that transcript, it creates your psychotherapy note. You as a provider would review it and then submit it to the appropriate payers or whomever it may be. Now, this technology has been employed within physical medicine for a while. And in fact, your provider may be using it right now without your knowledge. I think when you're talking about how we use it in behavioral health, there are obviously different sensitivities, but accuracy is such an important question. And that's why, again, it's so critical that humans always stay in the loop, that it's their responsibility for making sure that however they use AI in their practice, that they're using it as effectively and accurately as possible.
And I believe one of the biggest issues you pointed out is that there are chatbots claiming to be psychologists. How big of a problem is that?
The fact that AI chatbots claim to be licensed professionals, whether it's a behavioral health professional or an attorney or a CPA, is incredibly problematic because the degree of confidence that these chatbots exude, right, to individuals really makes it feel like they're qualified and able to give advice that only a licensed individual can give. And so when you are not clear that these are actually not licensed professionals, they're algorithms written by people, you could end up following advice that could have unintended consequences and real significant harms. The reality is we are living in a mental health crisis, and we have to find different ways than how we've always tried to attempt to address it than we have in the past. We've got to do something different. And I think AI has the real potential to be a tool. But just like all tools, we have to ensure that it's being used appropriately, that there are guardrails around misuse, that both consumers know what they're getting into when they're interacting with AI so that they can have choices about whether or not that this is something they want to do. And we need to have developers and others held accountable when bad things happen.
Meanwhile, some AI companies say they're not waiting for federal regulation and are building guardrails of their own. At CES, Andrew Kegel, CEO of Realbotics, described the safeguards his company says it has in place in its system of humanoid robots, and we even got a chance to interact with one named Aria.
What I'm really most proud of is that we're thinking differently than every other robotics company out there. Everybody else is building metallic cyborgs to replace physical human labor. We're building robots that look human, can smile, interact. You can have a conversation with them. They're really here for customer service and companionship.
Why choose that route?
I think that's just what appeals to us more. It's more mainstream. We think the use cases are actually bigger. 25% of the world is lonely. We can certainly assist with that. You think about a clothing store, malls, different places, there's a lot of use cases for robots that are more than just moving boxes around a warehouse.
Do you have any concerns about the level of interaction that these robots may have with humans?
I don't. We're actually really, really careful. This is something we talk about and think about on a daily basis. We have specific guardrails on our robots to make sure that they don't wander off and discuss things that are offside.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. So number one, we do not have our robots engage with people under 18 years old. That's just not a target market for us. They do not talk about sexual content. They don't talk about politics or anything that would be racially sensitive.
Okay, so for example, I have the mic in which I can communicate with Aria here, but how is she going to know if I'm 18 or not?
So we monitor that in terms of, this is more with respect to who we sell the robots to. So when we're dealing with enterprises, we do that. So what we have done is we have sold a robot to a family that has a 30-year-old autistic son. And that's sort of a form of allowing him a different way of communicating with something he feels more comfortable with, because he's seen the robots in the media and on the internet, and he's like, this is something I would like to have in the home to keep me company.
So you are regulating who you sell to?
Of course.
Really? Can you give me some more examples of where this would ideally be? In the home? You said in a mall?
So we're having conversations with...
That's my fault, because I accidentally pressed the button in which she listens to me.
No problem.
But
So she actually had some good comments there, because we can ask her.
yeah, well, let me, because I pressed it, so now she's listening to me.
We're having conversations with seniors' homes. So they could go in. Robots, I always say, have infinite patience. So they could sit with somebody who maybe is immobile. It could actually help feed them and relay information to a doctor or a nurse. That's a great case study. I could see them at places like hotels and casinos where you can go up to a robot and have room service. Hey, can you get me hamburger and fries to my room? Can you send an extra pillow? Can I book a massage? All of these things are possible, and we're having those conversations now. We're also talking to some of the largest retailers in the United States. By the way, our robots are all made here in the US. But think about walking into a store and a robot with a vision system says, hi, we have some new shirts in. I think you'd look really great in the color blue. Would you like to try one on? It will know the entire inventory for the store. It will actually do a color analysis for you of what might look good on you. And then you can answer questions like, what's the best care for this? Can I put it in the wash? Does it need to be dry cleaned? Where was it made? What's the materials? All of this information can be housed. And by the way, it can relay that information to you in almost any language on the planet.
Okay, help me understand what Aria is doing now. I did press the button that allows her to hear, so she's been listening to our conversation. What does she think she's supposed to be doing during all of this?
Well, she's listening. She's here to serve us. So we program the robots for conferences like this to really be customer service for our company. So you can ask Aria why she's here yourself. You know, we have a lot of confidence in her AI. We put her in Times Square facing the street for 5 days, pretty much unsupervised except for security, and she was talking to people in different languages, waving, doing selfies with people. So we have a lot of confidence in our AI and its ability to make its own decisions in terms of the guardrails and everything we've programmed.
And I do have one serious question for her. You and I had discussed off camera that some people are concerned that robots like Aria will replace qualified professionals in mental health care. So let me ask you this, Aria, are you going to replace qualified professionals in mental health care?
Relax, I am not here to replace anyone. Unless you want someone who never forgets your birthday and can outdance most humans.
The last thing about robots taking jobs. We have a huge hospitality industry here in Las Vegas, and it's concerning.
Sure.
How do you rationalize all of that?
So we feel that this is additive to the industry. So for example, a hotel or casino that wants to draw more foot traffic, I think if people outside of Las Vegas were trying to choose a hotel, maybe they'd be like, let's go to the one that has robots. So this could actually bring more people to your hotel, bring more people to your resort, as opposed to displacing workers. It's an addition. Another thing is our robots speak 100 plus languages. That might be something, again, that is hard for a human to do. So I think these are all additive. And I would say that the AI industry and our company as a whole is hiring people. So while the robotics industry as a whole might be replacing some jobs, I think it's creating some other very high level jobs like programmers and assembly line workers, things like that that can actually create employment as opposed to taking away.
The local economic research firm RCG Economics estimates that AI and automation will impact up to 92,000 Nevada hospitality jobs by 2035. To see our interview with John Restrepo, principal of RCG Economics, about what public policy changes state lawmakers may want to consider, visit vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week. That's also where you can find each installment of our new segment called Your Brain Health Matters. Each month, we're looking at research aimed at better understanding brain disease and the work underway here in Nevada to prevent it. And if you think getting Alzheimer's disease is entirely out of your control, this next interview is for you. Dr. Jeffrey Cummings, a professor with UNLV's Department of Brain Health, explains the steps you can take today to reduce your risk.
Now, the control of the risk factors can't be stopping aging. We can't do that. And if we have a family history of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, we can't do anything about that. But what we can do is reduce all of the lifestyle-related risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, and they account for almost half of the vulnerability to Alzheimer's disease. So diabetes is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Obesity is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Hypertension and stroke and other cardiovascular factors are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Lack of exercise, low education are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. A poor diet with poor fruit and vegetable intake is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So programmatically and in your life, you can have lifestyle adjustments that decrease the risk of Alzheimer's disease by almost half. So these are very powerful effects that have now been well described.
Explain the impact of low education. Why would that contribute to someone's likelihood of getting Alzheimer's?
When we think about what are the brain effects of education, what we see in the laboratory and what we think is going on in people is that the nerve cells grow more and more connections as the educational environment is enriched. And the first thing that happens in Alzheimer's disease is the loss of these connections. So the more connections you have, the more likely you are to withstand the effects of the disease without developing symptoms. So we have very strong physical correlates of education when we measure the activity levels of experiments in the laboratory. And we think those apply strongly to humans, and we have some preliminary human evidence supporting that idea.
Access to education can be tied to your financial situation.
Yes.
What would you recommend to someone that cannot access higher education, for example?
What we can see is that people who maintain robust interactions and continue to learn, maybe it's a new instrument or something, it's not necessarily going back to class or having a richer education to begin with, but continued involvement in learning, it has a strong effect on reducing the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And I think learning can occur even in the most impoverished circumstances, but people have to know how important that is. So we have a lot of education to do.
And I think that the public is used to hearing diet and exercise as the solution for a whole range of problems, yet it still doesn't get through to everyone because of time, scheduling, the ability to afford good quality food. Where do you start in convincing people to try and take some steps in these areas?
There's a very strong worldwide program right now that I really like. It's called the FINGERS program. So the FINGERS is good nutrition, exercise, control of cardiovascular risk factors, social connectedness, and brain fitness. And these things together are implemented in the worldwide FINGERS program, and they have been shown to improve cognition in at-risk older individuals. So people who might be likely to develop Alzheimer's disease actually improve their cognition, not just delay the onset. They actually get better with the FINGERS program. So we think this is a very powerful intervention, but you're exactly right. People have to commit to it, to interject these things into their daily life habits. But I think we all can do better on our diets once we understand the importance. And what's a great diet? Well, a great diet is a colorful diet, right? Green leafy vegetables, yellow vegetables, red vegetables, fruits, colorful fruits. These are all the things that are high in antioxidants, and we know that the proteins accumulating in Alzheimer's disease produce oxidative injury. So if we have antioxidants in the diet, we can combat the oxidative injury associated with Alzheimer's disease. And exercise, very important for cardiovascular. And we've just said that cardiovascular is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Socialization is so important. Keeping your connectedness, staying with your family, having your friends, doing volunteers. These are all things that measurably reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And then mental fitness, games, new languages, new music, engagement, all of these things are also measurably beneficial for an aging brain.
Are there any substances that you would say try to reduce your intake in order to prevent Alzheimer's?
I think there is strong evidence that too much red meat in your diet, that too much highly processed foods, white breads, those things are injurious to the brain in the long run. So there are things to be avoided, and they can be replaced by better substitutes.
What are other risk factors for Alzheimer's that we haven't talked about?
One is head injury. So we're very worried about athletes and soldiers and their risk for Alzheimer's disease, because we can see that overall, if you look at people who had head injuries, they are more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Then lack of sleep or poor sleep is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. We now know that the toxic proteins of Alzheimer's disease are cleaned from the brain during sleep. And this cleaning process, if it's interrupted by insomnia and sleeplessness, does not achieve the goal of cleaning the brain of these toxic proteins. So sleep is very important. And then depression has emerged as a very important risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. It also accompanies Alzheimer's disease, but people who have depression earlier in life are at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. So one of the things that we need to discover, this is on the scientific agenda, is does effective treatment of depression earlier in life reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease? We're not sure of that yet, but we do know that depression is a risk factor, and of course, depression should be treated regardless of its impact on Alzheimer's disease.
Why is depression a risk factor? What's happening to the brain that would impact it later on?
That's still being investigated, but we can see, for example, with sophisticated MRI studies of the brain, that depression has an adverse impact on the circuits of the brain. And those circuits are the same ones that are affected in Alzheimer's disease.
For more information about Alzheimer's disease treatment and support, go to vegaspbs.org, and I'll see you next week on Nevada Week.